Shalom. We are in Parshat this week, Deuteronomy, the end of chapter 11 through 16. In recent years, this has become my favorite Torah portion. Why? Well, there's a lot in it, but there is one commentary I can't wait to share with you today. In this Parsha, Moses tells the people that they are being given a choice between a life of blessing if they are faithful to God's commandments and a cursed life if they are not. The Torah continues that when they enter the land, they will reaffirm this with a covenantal ritual at the mountains of Gerizim and Ebal. As Moses approaches his final days, he reviews all the commandments that God has given Israel. We read in this week's Sedra a strong condemnation, some severe laws against Canaanite idolatry. The Israelites are also reminded of the command that there shall be but one single place of worship for God, where their offerings, where all their tithes will be given, a central sanctuary in a place that God will one day designate. Of course, we know that to be Jerusalem. The people are also warned about false prophets. The Torah this week says that even if a person is able to demonstrate signs, even if the person can perform miracles, if that prophet urges the people to turn away from God, to turn away from God's commandments, that is a false prophet. The people are warned against excessive mourning practices, against eating non-kosher animals. We have in this week's Sedra the obligation to support the poor. That's emphasized again, as are all the three pilgrimage festivals of Passover, of Shavuot, and Sukkot. So yeah, it's a big Sedra, and there's a lot in it, including two sentences right next to each other that when you read it, it seems to contradict one another. In Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 4, it's talking about helping the poor. And the Torah says, Efes ki lo yiyeh becha evyon, there shall be no poor among you. But then, just a few sentences later, in verse 11, it says, Ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz, for there will never cease to be needy ones in your land. So the obvious question is, which is it? There will be no poor among you, or there will always be poor in your land. Aren't those contradictory? But listen to the words of a 19th, early 20th century Polish Lithuanian rabbi, Yecheskel Lifshitz. He says, verse 11, where it says there will always be poor people in your land, that's talking about how the world unfortunately is, reality. Verse 5, there will be no poor among you, but you are not going to allow it where you are. You may not be able to change the world, but you have an obligation within your community to make sure there are no poor in your midst. Each of us has that responsibility. God, I think that's brilliant. You know, the issue of poverty, of hunger, and human misery is as prevalent as it is pernicious. And as Mazon, the premier Jewish organization dedicated to fighting hunger, notes, poverty is not restricted only to third world countries, but increasingly among millions of families in highly industrialized nations. Yes, including this country. And the factors behind this, as we know, are many. We all want to fight poverty, but often it seems like it's a hopeless battle. And I think what the Torah appears to acknowledge is that that reality is true. That's verse 11. There will always be poor in our midst, but not on our watch. Because what the Torah is teaching us in verse 5 is that we're not allowed to accept that reality. not under our watch, not in our midst. You know, I think of the passage from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, where it says, you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist. That's why I love this Parsha so much, and I love that commentary by Rabbi Lifshitz. It is rooted in harsh reality, but it also reminds us of the great responsibility we have to the most vulnerable. We can't change the entire world, but we can't shrug our obligations. God bless those in our midst who refuse to accept that the needs of the poor are too many and we cannot do more. And God bless those who join forces with local, state, and federal leaders to protect and strengthen federal nutrition programs and advocate for public policies that address some of the root causes of hunger. It may be work that can never be completed, but we, my friends, are obligated to never stop helping those in our midst and those within our reach. May God help us all in this holy task. Amen.